Oh,
What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for yet another panel show, and we've got a debutant making his first appearance on the panel show today, George from Do-Rag Diaries. How are we doing, George? We all saw you on the watch along, brought home 3 points against Brentford, but how are you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, man, I'm good. It was good to be on the watch along. I know some people were saying that George and Ash might be the lucky duo. It was our first win in a long time, so maybe when we have a big game, we might need to make that happen. But no, it was a pleasure, and yeah, look, good to be here on some good pastures. Because last time it was 3 points, this time it's after 3 points. I'm like, yeah, I can finally be happy for once.
Manifest that positivity, George, just like my brother next to me. He's the king of manifesting positivity. But we'll bring on Johnny H, returning to the panel show. He as well, it was quite a while ago, did his first watch along on Galatasaray game. Didn't bring the luck as maybe George did, but how are we doing, Johnny?
Yeah, no, all good. Listen, like George says, it's great to come on after a win, however we got it. And after a fantastic demonstration and a show of support for Change for Spurs. So all in all, a very good weekend.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we watched Match of the Day. I mean, I actually even watched Match of the Day.
You know what, Johnny? It's funny you should say that, because that was the first time I watched Match of the Day in probably
weeks.
This turn of the year, I think, since the turn of the year.
first match of the day of 2025.
Yeah, literally. Sim, all good?
Oh, look, 3 points. We've got to enjoy the wins while we can at the moment, because there's been very few of them in recent weeks. And I think, hopefully, this win can kind of be a turning point when it comes to the players coming back. Maybe that positivity is going to start flowing through the squad now. I do think when you look at that team and you look at that bench, and all of a sudden you're thinking, wow, we have options. And this squad ain't too bad when it's looking like that. And I think we've been decimated for so long. I think all of us forget that we actually do have like these players aren't dead; they are coming back, and we do have a squad when they are fit and available. And wasn't the best performance. We'll get into that, but I think there were signs that things could start to turn. Hopefully.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with George, because, I got to the stadium, I looked at my phone, I see the lineup, and I see Maddison in there, I see Vicario in there. You look at the bench and you're like, wow, we're not holding a creche on the bench anymore. We've actually got players that can come on and make an impact. Odebear, Brennan Johnson, Destiny Udogie, these kind of players. And, you're looking at the performance against Manchester United. I don't think it was a performance that blew us away, but now you're seeing these players come back. Can we really kick on from it now?
Yeah, it's one of those games when you look at it, like the performance itself wasn't that pretty, and it's going into the game. I don't think any of us expected it to be a pretty performance. We've seen some really bad ones coming into it. Aston Villa and Liverpool were two of our worst games of the season. So when you just go into this game with a low expectation, all you really wanted the team was to do, get the job done. It's 3 points. It's a big team. It's one of the worst teams that you could play at the moment. And it was just about getting the job done. So that's what we've done. And when you look at the team that we put out, I was impressed. I think Maddison had a good performance. I think we leaned on our senior players, and they actually done what they've been needing to do for the past couple of weeks. Because the likes of Bentancur, the likes of Maddison, the likes of even Basuma, Ben Davies, I'd say, is probably the one player that's been a rock at the back majority of the time that he's played. He's not really made too many mistakes. He gives you a moderate level of performance. It's never an 8 or 9 out of 10, but it's always a 7. He's always just going to give you a decent performance at the back, and he's maintained that. But I think in this game in particular, we leaned on those senior players. I think Bentancur was a lot more positionally disciplined. He held that 6 role well, didn't bomb forward so much, so he was sitting in front of the defense. Having Danso there has been a huge boost as well. I feel like that game was one where I really looked at him. I was like, okay, this is what I like to see. He's playing a bit like Romero. The way he steps up in the press, he can be aggressive at times. He's even confident to go forward down the right wing, do a few passes, try put a cross into the box. Like with his forward play, he wants to make things happen. So again, it's things that we can look at and take positives from. I don't think that I'm looking at, I'm like, yeah, Ipswich, Man City, these are easy 3 points now. I don't think it's ever going to be that case with Spurs, but it's one where I'm going to look at the team. I'm like, Jed Spence had another amazing performance. And just really going to have to start questioning what he did say the other day, because Jed Spence, for me, is the one player, the first name on the team sheet. Since he's been in the team, I haven't seen one bad performance from him. And then you got to look at the likes of Odebert, who came back very bright, exciting on the left wing. There was that one moment in the second half, saw Jed Spence, Odebert, and Tell, and I was, dare I say it, I was like, wow, we might have our Tottenham back, like footballers. Actual
Come on.
footballers. The guys that
We're
can do the
back,
job,
people.
and they're actually almost. But yeah, like it just looked like we've got a lot of young players now, and they're all starting to breed together. And it might come to similar to the way Chelsea did at the back end of last season. If you can just put a run together, get some really good games like they did with Pochettino, the season won't look so bad. But it's about going out there and getting that and picking up a win streak, because I don't think Spurs have won 3 Premier League games in a row for, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure it's like nearly 18 months or something like that.
It's
been
not
a
this
very
season,
long time.
not this season.
Yeah, not this season at all. So it's been a while. So we need to see these players maintain the consistency of the performance, but it's a step forward, and that's the most important thing. It's a step forward from what we've been seeing in the last couple of weeks. And Ange can definitely look at it and say, look, we've got a few players back. Now we can start to figure out some of the solutions, because we've seen him try to adapt and try to, work with the players he's got. But as I think many of us have realized, he's not a manager that's really specializing at doing that. He's got to use his players, and when he does, those players will thrive. So some positives, some negatives, but looking at the next couple games, we can definitely go into there thinking we can get something from them.
So a bit more positivity going in.
Wait,
into
George,
the
when
next
you
few
said Man
games.
United are one of the worst teams to face right now, you meant quality they're bad, or you meant you don't want to face them?
Quality, they're bad, yeah.
Right, yeah, got you.
No,
I
like
was
as in,
making
yeah,
sure.
like if there's any top team to face, you're like, yeah, give me United.
Got you.
Exactly what
I was just making sure I was on the same track as you.
Yeah, I mean, if he would have said Man United were one of the best teams in the league, I think there'd be probably something to worry about.
I want to know what he's coming here. Maybe it was a better win than I thought. All right.
Johnny talked to me, because I saw when Sim mentioned saying Spurs are back now, I saw you grimacing a little bit, smile kind of wiped off your face. So where are you at with it? Do you think with these back-to-back wins in the Premier League, back-to-back clean sheets in the Premier League, is any sort of significance? Can we kick on from here?
I thought Sim was doing a Daniel Levy impression when he said, "I've got our Tottenham. We got our Tottenham." I mean, please come on. Look, a win is a win, and I'm delighted that we won. But let's not get excited, guys. Right? And look, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And Ange always says, we've got all these injuries. Man United had 11 injuries. He talks about having school kids on the bench. Man United seriously really did have school kids on the bench.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, if Garnacho knew where the goal was and Vicario didn't make numerous saves, there was no way that we were coming out of that with a clean sheet. And I think we can look on that as a bit of a get out of jail that they didn't score a goal. And I've got to be honest with you. Yes, Danso looks good. Yes, we all know the return of the Jedi, Jed Spence, fantastic. But we were carved open far too easily by a very poor Man United team. And
Johnny, not only that, but they're a team that can't really create chances against anyone else consistently.
Correct. I mean, I'm not being funny. People seem to have forgotten. When we played Coventry earlier in the season, bar some horrendous finishing, even a late Jed Spence goal wouldn't have saved us. Or the fact that Tamworth, that heart in the mouth moment when that ball came over, had he connected with it, it would have been our first defeat by a non-league.
Why bring up these games, Johnny? We're back now. These are in the past.
1912. No, what I'm saying is, I don't see any difference, guys. I don't see any difference in the fact that we are still being carved open. And what I'm saying to you is, I will reserve judgment when we actually play a half-decent team. I don't include Ipswich on that yet. Let's be honest, we rested a lot of players before the Ipswich game and got beat. We have to go to Ipswich and wipe them off the park for me to start getting excited. I want to believe that the tide has turned and we're on our way. But for me, the only thing that's important that's left in this season is getting Mickey van der Ven back, getting Romero back, and getting our main players back for the push to win the Europa League. And that, for me, is I want to be in Bilbao with you guys, celebrating, dancing in the streets with this cup, because that, for me, will be the definitive moment for this club. Because I believe if we can win this trophy, we can look back and say, wow, this was a sliding doors moment, because suddenly we're in the Champions League. All that happened in the league is wiped out and is totally irrelevant. Our income goes up, our spending goes up, the quality of player goes up, and we will look back on this and look forward, rather than if we get knocked out, this will be a horrendous season. It really will be, and one that has to be addressed at the end of the season.
But wait a sec, Johnny. Wait a sec, Johnny. I just want to go back to the point you said about, getting into the Champions League and everything will change in terms of our spending going up and the quality of player going up. I mean, has that ever happened for us? Like, whilst being in the Champions, like, are we in a different pool of players right now than when we were in the Champions League? You know what I mean?
Well, I think we got better players, but I think the format now is bringing in far greater income. The income now, if you look at the generating of income, I think Arsenal have already made something like 90 million, which is astronomical in compared to what it was last time.
We've only made 18 million so far in the Europa League. That's the difference.
Correct, and also the fact that when you're trying to, sell Elfsberg managed by Santa Claus, it's very difficult in comparison to selling AC Milan, Juventus, or Real Madrid at home. It's a different ball game, and £30 ticket suddenly becomes a £95 ticket. So, and the spin-offs and the sponsorship, I really feel that this is the only way out of this season, and I think I'd be amazed if the club aren't saying that or talking about that right now. I know a lot of fans are saying, "Oh, we're only 13 points off of, I don't know, 7th place or 6th place."
Who's saying that? Who's
saying that? Who's
saying that?
5th place,
Who's saying that?
13 points. It's child's play.
They're out there. They're out there. Sim. They're out there. Listen, look.
It's only.
It is only. But look, let's be positive. It's a win, like I said. But there were positives. I mean, they didn't look to exploit Vic at the corners, but he made some fantastic saves. The one where he made the save and then got up quickly to make the second, I thought was superb. And Jed Spence, wow, just absolutely wow. I don't know what Ange has been watching. He was obviously in his shed having a cup of coffee or something when Jed was training. Because right now this guy's undroppable. I think what I'd like to see is, I think Pedro Porro desperately needs a rest, and I'd like to see him switched up to right back, Destiny brought into left back, and give Porro a rest, because we will be needing him for the bigger games to come later on in the season.
Sim,
don't you think though, Johnny?
Go on, George.
Sorry, just briefly, Ben. I just wanted to bring it back to what you mentioned about the money and Champions League money. Don't you think that's sort of an excuse for the ownership to say we need to make more money from Champions League games, we need to make more money from the Championship sponsors and all this stuff? Because at the moment, Tottenham is still revenue-wise up there within the top 10 within Europe, even without having all of these other revenue streams through Champions League. When you go out there and you look at, I know net spend is not necessarily a real thing because clubs are always making money outside of selling and buying players. But if you look at our net spend, it's one of the highest in the Premier League across the last 5 years. But when you actually look at the bigger problem of it is it's the wages. We don't compete with any of the other top 6 or 7 teams with the wage wise. So when you're going out there and you're getting a Brennan Johnson on £50 million, but he's on 60, 70k per week, it's not the same as going to buy a player for £35 million and putting them on 200k a week, for example. And that's the biggest difference between Spurs and with the players that we're going to attract, because like you mentioned, the Champions League players that we may want to bring into the club, they're going to want those big money wages, 150, 200k a week. Just look at Timo Werner. Probably Matisse Tell's probably going to be on money 100k plus a week. So that's where the issue lies, is it not? Not where we need to make more money. It's just what we're doing with it currently.
What I would say is, look, the club have, 50 Cent playing, but we should be called 42%, right? I mean, we are 42%. I mean, that's who we are, okay? And you're quite right. If you want to get the top players, you have to spend the money on the wages. It's all about the wages. Whatever you say about players, they're mercenary, okay? It's as simple as that. Otherwise, Saudi would be sitting there with empty stadiums with no players in it. Okay, they've gone there for the money, pure and simple. And if you're going to pay 42% of your income on wages, but what I'm saying, George, imagine the combination of the massive increase in Champions League money that's taken place this season, coupled with the extra fixtures, coupled with the fact that potentially a new owner, which I'm sure the boys will get onto in a minute, or even this owner showed some ambition. Ambition is not with the number 42%. Ambition is 60, 70%. That is ambition. And, if you combine 60, 70% plus Champions League, I think we are a different football club. That's me personally.
Talking of 50 Cent, Johnny, I mean, I think 50 Cent will definitely miss a trick if he don't play patiently waiting at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, because that's what we've all been doing for 24 years. And also, he'll also miss a trick if he doesn't open up with many men and have Ange Postecoglou do the walk at the start. But Sim, talking about our Spurs back, I don't want no sarcasm here. I want to know what you really think. Are Spurs back right now?
I don't think that performance is going to convince anyone that we're back at our best, and that is the performance that is going to be the turning point. I know it wasn't the best performance. I think we probably rode our luck at times. I did think we were better than Man United, and I know Man United, everyone's going to focus on the chances they had, but we definitely had more than enough chances to kill that game, especially on the breakaway. Tell had, I think, 7 shots on the day. He probably should have ended up the game with a goal as well. I think we also had our chances. I think the expected goals we had over 2 compared to Man United. So I think that is actually in line. If you look at the numbers, it's more in line with how we were playing at the beginning of the season rather than during this spell that we've had over the last 2 months. Because before the injuries, we were averaging like over 2 XG and only conceding about 1, and this game was more in line with that than it was with during the injury crisis. We're averaging only about 1 XG and conceding 2. So I think the numbers suggest it's realigning a bit more with kind of the performance before the injury crisis. I would say it was disappointing the good quality chances Man United had, for sure. So I think a lot of it came from our own struggles in build-up, not necessarily due to them carving us open from open play. It was more we would lose the ball with a sloppy pass in the middle of the park and they would spring on us and create an opportunity. And that's something we got to sort out, for sure. And obviously, you got people like Dan So, who are new to the team. Obviously, Vicario is just coming back. So I think hopefully these things all will get sorted out. And in a way, it's a weird one because these 5 players coming back, yes, it's obviously it's a massive positive, but as well, it's like we've been kind of trying to gel as a team while they've all been out. So now they've got to be kind of reintegrated, and hopefully the training, they've now had a week in training, and you saw the team was a lot fresher in this game than definitely they have been over the last 2 months. I think that was the biggest element. I think when it comes to tactical stuff, when it comes to how the team looked, I think the pressing was a lot more coordinated, definitely a lot better, higher pressing. I still think defensively there were some issues, and I still think as well going forward some of the patterns of play still needs that kind of rhythm. And I think definitely when we were counter-attacking, number of opportunities to open Man United up, which we failed to capitalise on. I think if we had a more rhythm in our play and the team had a bit more cohesion about them, I think that the game could have easily ended 2 or 3-0 rather than leaving it to 1-0 near the end. And I think that will come with a bit more time on the training pitch, a 1-game week for the next few weeks. Hopefully will help with that. But given the form we've been on and the fact that we've got these players back and the fact that Man United still had a whole bench of youth players and the form, they haven't exactly been on great form either. And the fact they were able to create the number of the chances they had and could have easily taken a point from the game, in all honesty, if they took some chances. I'm not going to sit here and say this was evidence that the corner's definitely turned and it's only upwards from here, but I definitely think there are signs that could be the case. That's what I will say, but I wouldn't say it's conclusive evidence, because if we go and lose to Ipswich, then you're back to square one, and people will say you weren't even good against Brentford and Man United, and you just luckily got the win, and against Ipswich, you got what you deserve. So I think we got to back it up with better performances. We got to perform better than we did on Sunday, but I definitely think there are signs that the tide could start to turn. There's more energy in the team, and you can just see the difference in the quality having Vicario and Maddison in there. And this is what I was saying during that injury crisis. Yes, we were losing games, but we were only losing games only by the odd goal. And you add a bit more quality, you add a bit more energy, and those will start to turn. And I think that was a bit of evidence that is the case. That those results will start to flip in our favour, and we'll start to win by a goal instead of lose by a goal if we add those little bits to the team. And I think we did that. We got the win. I think Vicario made such a difference. His shot-stopping ability, one of the best in the league. And I think having him in goal, I know Kinski's done well. I'm not trying to shit on Kinski. I think he's stepped in admirably. But you could just see there's a difference in shot-stopping ability. The goal Kinski conceded against Arsenal, the goal Kinski conceded against Villa away, maybe even Leicester as well. Some of these goals Vicario is stopping. He ain't letting those in. And I think that was proof when it went against Man United with superb handling, superb shot-stopping. Maddison, the creativity, the on-the-ball quality, which we just haven't seen in the middle of the park. As much as Bergval's done well, he just doesn't have that ability yet that Maddison possesses, with some of his passing ability and some of that ability to turn players on a sixpence when they're pressing him and create openings like Maddison can do. I think that also just made that little bit of a difference. And look, we can all shit on Man United. We can all say they're rubbish. And it is true. They're not in a great moment at the moment. And they also have a lot of injuries going into this game. But this is also a team that recently went to Anfield and got a point. Went to the Etihad and won 2-1. Went to Emirates and got a 1-1 draw ticket to penalties. Went to Craven Cottage and got a 1-0 win. This was all in the last 6 weeks. So I think as much as we're expected to win, and they're not. I agree, it would have been a massive disappointment if we didn't win. You can't take it as a given. You can't take it as a foregone conclusion, because these teams who you could argue are better than us right now maybe did that, and they came unstuck. So we had to go and win the game, and that's what we did.
The problem I see with us trying to muster up some sort of form now, a lot of the teams that we played over this kind of run, or teams that we've played already, are kind of, we're losing to Leicester at home, drawing to Wolves, losing to Everton, the teams that we should be getting 3 points against. And I know we got Ipswich up next, but after that we got Man City, we got Bournemouth, we've got some of the form teams in the Premier League. So I mean, George, do you feel like we can kind of go toe-to-toe with these teams, the Man Cities, who are really starting to come back into it now? I mean, you look at Man City's performance on the weekend, that really did look like the Man City of old, them really getting back to their best with Nico Gonzalez in the middle, Omar Mamouche up top with Erling Haaland. And then you got Bournemouth as well with all their injury problems. They're just battering teams left, right and centre. So do you think that we can kind of go on a run with these teams coming up?
It's hard with the Man City game. It's one of those ones where there's always pressure off Tottenham, and Tottenham always tend to turn up. It's like Man City. We are Man City's bogey team. No matter how good, no matter how bad they are, we tend to get a result in that one. So I am leaning towards us being able to get something, whether that's a draw or a win. I think we can leave with something there. I'm probably looking at the Bournemouth game as more tricky for me, because that's against a team that, although they have a lot of injuries, I think a few of their injuries will be due back by that time. Areola, we saw in that first game, they just countered our football so well. When we talk about creating chances and breaking us down, Bournemouth could have scored 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 that game. I just remember them having chance after chance. Yeah. And we were really lucky to walk away with a 2-1. So I'm looking at that game, and tactically, I'm like, this presents problems for Ange. The one good thing is that going into these games, apart from the Man City one, I know we've got the international break just before the Bournemouth one. So a lot of these players can get rest, and they may be able to come back feeling a bit more fitter and fresher. But that City one, it does come midweek. I'm just hoping Man City, obviously, I think tomorrow they've got Real Madrid. On the weekend, they've got Liverpool. And then they're going into that game with us where they probably might look at that game as a rested game because they've got FA Cup on the weekend after that as well. So we're the game in between all their tricky fixtures they got coming up. I know it's only Plymouth, but you've seen what Plymouth done to Liverpool and done to Brentford. So they're probably going to look at it like, we're going to need to keep some players fit and fresh for that one. I think the City game is the one where it presents an opportunity. If we can get a win in Ipswich and then maybe get a draw or some points off City, then that's a good 3-game streak where you're like, okay, team's got a few points here. Every other game after that, it'd be so hard to predict what Tottenham's going to turn up because that's the thing with us this season. You can never really guess how good the team's going to want to perform and if their mentality is actually there and that they want to be that top team, because Kulusevski said it in an interview the other day. His focus is just, look, never getting their head down. We've now got to get into that top half of the Premier League and we've now got to take and focus on what we can, and that's Europa League. We've got to get the wins in Europa League. But at the same time, I think there's a few players in the team that we've seen far too often. Their heads go down as soon as that first goal gets conceded. And that's where the issue is. It's in the game itself. The players lose themselves. So they just need to make sure they're focused on the goals ahead of them and they're unified as a team. Because like Sim pointed out, I think the biggest return for me, Vicario in goal. Big Vic in goal. He's a real leader. I feel like he's the only person I look at the team and say, he's an actual captain. He's a leader. He's someone that leads by example, but also he's berating the team consistently. And that back line is the one that's constantly talking to them. And I think we've missed that because when Kinski or Forster's been in goal, it's been very messy. The gaps between the defenders, they're so far apart. There's no one really directing and guiding them. So I think he's been a huge return for us. And look, we saw the last time we actually did have a home win or a big win was when he played against City. And we've been horrible since that game. So having Big Vic return, I think it's gave us that boost and that calmness for when teams are attacking. We know we got a confident goalkeeper there who can deal with it.
Yeah, and everyone's bemoaning the fact of leadership on the pitch. And you look at it, Romero, Maddison, Vicario, all three players that are part of the leadership group alongside Sonny have all been out for long stretches. And I totally agree. Vicario is a massive plus for us going into it. But what I want to know from you, Johnny, I know you've had questions about Ange Postecoglou over a long stretch of time. No, yeah, you. I'm looking at you, Johnny. Me as well. I mean, maybe a bit of a shorter time than you. But first of all, right now, as it stands, 18th of February, would you sack Ange Postecoglou? And if the answer is yes, which I think it is, just give me a little nod if it is. Is it yes? Come on, we got him back.
Oh, no, listen, I can't. It's very difficult because basically what I would say to you is, do I think Ange is the man? No. Do I think we can sack him right here, right now? The answer is no. Because, you know, it's going to play out, isn't it? He's going to play out this whole the whole of the Europa League. And even if we get beaten by Ipswich, get beaten by Bournemouth, get beaten by Man City, look, our fans have got very short memories. Oh, we lost 7 games, I think it was, between January and May of last year. We had the players back. I was one of those fools, the guy who was turning around to his Arsenal mates and his Chelsea mates saying after the Chelsea game, you know, 2023, was it November 2023? Wait till we get our players back. Wait till then you'll see. And unfortunately, the players came back and exposed what I was worried about right at the beginning. Nothing's changing, and this is not going to work. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people don't agree with it and say I have an agenda. It's not an agenda as such. It's an observation. And, you know, football's about opinions, and I don't ever expect everyone to agree with me. But for me, as much as I think that Ange isn't the man, I don't think you can sack him. I really don't. Iriola, for me, for a long time now, has given me Poch vibes. He still does. I think he's a top manager. And I've got to be honest with you, I think Amorim is a very good manager as well. And You know, he has an absolute shit show down there at United, and I don't think even Pep or Ancelotti could sort that mess out at the moment. So stick with him. But I think Ange, when I was watching the game on Sunday, Sim, I know you're very positive and I admire it, but I look at the big picture here and I see any decent team carving us wide open. And quite honestly, if you're watching that game, how was Sonny still on that pitch? You know, I used to manage kids, and it's always hard when you're having to take off the kid when the dad's standing about 10 yards behind you. You're taking off my son. I can't believe it. He's been amazing. And you have to take him off. Come on. As much as you love Sonny, he needed to come off a long while ago. And when we saw Odegaard suddenly come on, oh my God, it was like the whole game lit up. When Odegaard linked up with Jed and the rest, you know, Tell, we looked sprightly. I mean, Odegaard and Tell are former teammates, you know, from France for under 19s, and they have an understanding, and hopefully they'll go on to be great mates and create a fantastic partnership, because that side there of Jed Spence, I like to see him on the right, but even on the left, on his weaker side, Odegaard, Jed overlapping with Tell. I mean, come on, that's exciting. That's exciting for me. But still, we have to tolerate seeing Sonny. I love Sonny. Sonny was, you know, when I heard after the first year he was thinking of going, I was devastated, because I've been bigging him up, and luckily for us, you know, Poch managed to convince him to stay, and it was a great decision. But he looks lost. He looks like a lost soul, and it's a sad sight to see. It's almost like when you look at one of these boxers going into the ring for one too many fights, and, you know, please quit. And I'm not saying he should quit, but when you look at Mo Salah and him, only 1 month apart in age, they look like players from different planets right now. And it's a sad sight to see. And I can't understand why Ange didn't bring on Odegaard, you know, with maybe 20 minutes to go. And one last question, one last thing I'd like to throw out there. Is this the last we're going to see of Mikey Moore in Spurs shirt this season?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because he does seem to tend... I mean, he was getting his minutes in the Europa League, wasn't he? And he was getting minutes off the bench. But, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I don't think he even should have had the limited game time that he has had in recent weeks,
Right.
of getting taken off at half-time in 2 games. But he needs game. You look at Ethan Nwaneri, right? He's doing so well because he's getting the chances and he's getting the game time and he's scoring goals and he's making an impact. And I think Mikey Moore has the ability to do something similar.
He's a believer, right? I don't believe Ange is a believer in the kids, and that's why, you know, you bring someone like Pochettino. If you gave that group of kids to Pochettino, I reckon we would have kids in the England setup. I really do. And you know what's worrying to me is that Mikey Moore deleted his goal that he scored for Spurs, his debut goal off of Instagram, and then 2 days later he deleted his X account. And I know I'm reading into it, and I don't know, but I said then, is this the acknowledgement by him, or has someone said to him, you know what, you've done very well, Mikey, but we're going to put you back into the under-21s now? And has the kid got upset? I'm just saying, I don't know for sure, but I'd be interested to see if he gets any more game time with Timo Werner coming back, Odegaard now fit, Tell, and all the others, and everyone else coming back. Will we even see him on the bench in about 2 or 3 weeks when the big boys come back?
Yeah, I mean, if he sides with Timo Werner on the bench over Mikey Moore, I think that's another one of those black marks against his name for Ange Postecoglou. But the question that I originally wanted to ask you, Johnny, is what does he need to do from now until the end of the season to save his job in your eyes?
I mean, honestly, it's like putting a sticking plaster on a gaping wound. I just don't think that he has the tactical nous and flexibility that's needed from a top manager. I looked at his career at Celtic. I mean, I'm a big Spurs fan, obviously, huge Spurs fan, but I lived in Glasgow for a few years, and I ended up supporting Glasgow Rangers, and so I sort of twinned with them. And so when I've been down, I always watch the Old Firm derbies, and I got to tell you, there was not one moment, even when Ange was beating Rangers time after time as their boss, did I ever think, oh my God, I'd love to have Ange Postecoglou as a Spurs boss. And their performances in Europe were poor. And I really don't think right now, and probably people would disagree with me, but I don't think we've been outstanding in Europe this season. I really don't.
I agree.
But a win's a win, and we've done this. Come on, we've had an easy ride. Even Galatasaray, who we got slaughtered by, AZ Alkmaar absolutely wiped them off the pitch. And, AZ Alkmaar came to this stadium with 3 of their top players missing, and we managed to beat them 1-0 with a penalty. I don't know. I think he's going to stay. I'm still completely baffled as to why a manager with a minuscule comparison to some of the great managers that have been dismissed at this club over the last few years, namely Conte, Mourinho, and Pochettino, with better win percentages and less support financially in the transfer market, have all been dismissed. And yet, for some reason, this manager has been given a pass. And listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Ange goes on to lift the Europa League, I will be delighted, and I will come on every channel and say I got it wrong. I don't have a problem with being wrong. I want Spurs to be a success. Whoever the manager is, whether I like him or not, whatever the player is, I'm happy to come around and say, you know what, I got it wrong. In fact, I think I came on your channel and said, you know what, I think Timo Werner could actually do a job for us. I mean, how wrong was I? I mean, he can run quick.
You were very wrong.
I was very wrong. I mean, the only thing he forgot to take with him was the football.
No, he takes that off the pitch when he dribbles it off the pitch.
Yeah.
He takes it.
No, but listen, he's going to stay. I would like to see a new manager come in the summer. Obviously,
regardless of what he does, only Europa League can save him. You reckon?
I reckon the Europa League will save him, unless there's something that we don't know. And let me tell you something: if the Qataris coming in, they ain't keeping Ange Postecoglou.
George, where are you at with it? Where are you at with Ange? And in terms from now until the end of the season, what does he need to do to save his job?
Yeah, no, for me, the turning point, I was a big advocate of Ange up until a few weeks ago, to be honest. I think the turning point for me was the Liverpool and Aston Villa games. And I know, obviously, the result, for me, I didn't really look at the results, and it wasn't like the result is what killed me. It was just the decision-making in the games, the mentality from the team, the coaching. I think the coaching's been a consistent issue for me. I don't feel like he's actually coached any players to be better, and that's where my main problem is with Ange. Is I think tactically he's shown that he can adapt at times. The adaptations aren't good enough, like Johnny said. He's missing that tactical nous and that depth to compete with the top managers in the Premier League at the moment. Even I think like a Thomas Frank from Brentford probably tactically is a lot better than him, just missing a lot of the players. But with Ange, my biggest issue has been him actually coaching players. I think a lot of the young players we have, and when you sign a lot of young players, you naturally expect the coach to bring the best out of them. I don't know if he's doing that with many of them in particular. I think a lot of them are just progressing as they would in their careers, regardless of the managers they got. So when you look at Mikey Moore, for example, although I think he's had some good opportunities, do I think he could have had more? Yes. Do I think that he could have been coached better? I think our whole attack should be coached better. I think Brennan Johnson has consistently made the wrong decisions in the final third, but I think maybe that's because he's not being told to make the right decisions, and he's not really been worked on that 1v1 coaching on, what to do when you get the ball, the dribbling and that type of aspect. So what he needs to do to save his job for me, definitely when you win the Europa League. I think that's the only thing he can do. The Premier League's all but done now. As you guys said, we're 13 points off sixth or seventh place. That's a 4-point swing. That's 4 games swing. We need those teams to lose 4 games and us to win 4 games. I don't know where I can see Tottenham winning 4 games in general, let alone win 4 more than the teams that are way above us. So that's where the issue lies, is we're so bad and so far below where we should be. The Premier League's not even salvageable, because the best position we could probably get is 9th, maybe 10th, and that's a horrid season in itself. But looking at the Europa League, it goes to show historically, away from home in Europe, we are terrible. I mean, we lost to Dynamo Zagreb with no manager. Like that's it couldn't get any worse than that, if we're being honest. We've lost to FC Basel when we've had Prime Bale running down our flanks. Like I don't really have too much confidence in Spurs, and particularly this team, when the mentality is all over the place. They didn't look like they wanted to go into that Liverpool and Aston Villa games and really win. So when we get a tough fixture away from home in Europe, whether that it could be AZ away from home, it could be Galatasaray away from home, or if we're talking about later rounds, we could get a Lazio, we could get a Bilbao, one of these big top teams. I'm not filled with confidence that this team is going to go out there and have the confidence to get the job done. So for Ange, it's not really looking good. It doesn't really look like the way that the season's going to play out, that he is going to be deserving of having a job after it. But I am with Johnny in saying that it doesn't make sense to sack him now or sack him in between the next couple of weeks, because any manager that does come in, it's not like they're going to be able to have a sustained improvement across the season, and you're not really going to be able to evaluate how good they are at the end of the season. So just let Ange play out the season. We can evaluate the options at the end of the season, look to bring in what managers are available, and that's the biggest thing. No managers are going to want to come in with 2 months left of the season to go. It's not like we have a relegation battle. They can't salvage anything. There's no target for them to aim for. So we're going to have to wait till the end of the season to evaluate what potential managers could come in. And then that's another issue for me, is because the managers out there, I don't think there's a wide pool of managers that are going to want to come to Spurs. Not top managers anyway, because they're seeing what Levy and what's happened to Conte. They're seeing what Mourinho. We are the graveyard for top managers. There's so many managers that come. Nuno's left, he's in second place. And Conte's top of his league. Jose Mourinho is in second place. Like, every manager that's leaving Spurs is in a better position than when they were with us. So when you look at it, it's like, will we be able to attract that top manager? It's going to be tough. And Champions League football is where they want to play, or Europa League football is going to be where they want to play. So if we've got no European football, and we're going to have a low budget, and we're not ambitious, it's just a recipe for disaster. So it's hard to have hope on that sense, but we can only hope and pray that Ange does turn the season around. And look, if he wins Europa League, like Johnny said, I'm more than happy to be wrong, because I've backed Ange for so long thinking that he could get it right, but I'm just convinced that it's not going to work out with this club in particular.
Do you feel, though, like, even if we don't win the Europa League, but give a good fist of it, but show a good level of consistency in the league from now to the end of the season, and maybe by the end of it you're looking back and saying, well, it really was just the injuries that derailed us, would that be enough for you to say, you know what, keep him in a job for at least till next season?
I just think from what we've seen enough of Ange to know that, again, the coaching is a problem. I look at our defenders, even our best players, Romero. You look at like a Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro has made the same mistake defensively since he's joined. The same thing. He doesn't get goal side. Like, Johnny was a coach. It's one of the first things you teach a kid in an 11-a-side game is when you defend, get goal side of your man. Pedro Porro's not done this for 18 months. So I just have to question the coaching. And if it's not Ange, it's the team around him. Matt Wells, Miles Jedinak, Ryan Mason. There's no surprise. They're all inexperienced. So if you're not going to sack Ange, then you need to bring better people around him to then make his game even better, because I think we're just being really naive at this moment in time and thinking that these young coaches are going to all of a sudden become a competitive team. I just don't see it happening.
Sim, what do you reckon? What does he need from now until the end of the season to save his job?
I think if he wants to guarantee his job for next season, regardless of what we do in the league, he has to win Europa League. If he doesn't win Europa League, he's leaving that opportunity to sack him open, I think. So I think if he wins that Europa, I can't see us sacking him. He'll be our most successful manager statistically since the 80s, like in terms of winning a trophy.
Good old Keith Birkinshaw. Andrew will probably walk out if we win the Europa League saying there used to be a football club there, mate.
Exactly. So I think if he wins Europa League, I don't think anyone can turn around and demand him being sacked, or anyone can can blame the hierarchy for keeping him on, because I think he would have been in Champions League football for next season. He would have done the remit for this season, which is win a trophy and get back in the Champions League, however way you do it, and obviously win Europa League.
Of an unorthodox way to do it.
But winning Europa League is obviously the best way to do it. If you offered everyone beginning of the season, you win Europa League or finish top 4, everyone would have said win Europa League. That would have been the preference. I think he's capable of doing it. I think obviously the round of 16 comes around in 3 weeks' time. I think we'll see what kind of condition Romero, Van de Ven are in, and Solanke in when that round comes through. If they're not fit for the round of 16, if we can get through that round without those 3, and then all of a sudden we have them fit for like the quarterfinal stage, and also maybe we're building some momentum in the league, then maybe we could harness that. And I do think when it comes to the squad we have, it is probably one of the stronger ones in the Europa League. And if we can start to overwhelm teams, I know there are some good teams in Europa League, as George mentioned. I think Lazio, Bilbao, all good teams that I think can be definitely our equal when it comes to these knockout stages.
I don't even want to meet Fenerbahce at this point. Jose Mourinho against us in the Europa League, no thanks.
Yeah, I think these teams are not going to be easy by any stretch, and I think for sure they can beat us, no doubt about it. But also we could also, on our day, I think we can beat them if we can play some of the football we were playing early in the season. I think we can blow teams away. I think we've shown that, especially at home. So I think, away from home in Europe, it hasn't been pretty. But if we can kind of get away in these away games, either getting a draw or only losing by a goal and then overwhelm teams at home, I think that could be really great for a two-legged tie. And I think we can do something in this Europa League. I really believe that. I think even maybe when it goes to the last stages, semi-finals, finals, when mentality comes into it and experience comes into it, do these players have that kind of mentality to get us over the line in those situations? I think obviously that remains to be seen, and the jury's definitely out on that. But in terms of us having a deep run in that competition and getting to that kind of stage, I really believe we can do that. I think we've got a good chance of getting to those stages. So maybe by the time we get to those stages, we'll have a bit of momentum behind us, and we'll have a bit of energy with the squad. If we have a fully fit squad, if they've been rotated in that time, and we're using the squad a bit better, and we've ironed out a few of the issues we're having tactically, then I think we can have a really good crack at that Europa League. When it comes to the league, I think, obviously, I agree with George. I think at this point, you got to say the league season's been completely derailed, and anything more than a 9th, 10th place finish is going to be really hard to achieve. I would just say I would be looking for, in terms of consistency, just get a solid 2 points per game, I think. Show that
to save his job.
Huh?
Is that enough to save his job?
That and a deep run in Europa League, I would say.
If we do that and lose in the semi-final of the Europa League.
If he's getting 2 points per game, if he shows he can have that level of consistency where 2 points per game is pretty much top 4 form, I think, over a season, and I think that is probably what we were looking for the majority of the season. So I think if he shows a fair level of consistency, gets around 2 or probably over 2 points per game, that's like 27 points probably from now to the end of the season, and has a deep run in the Europa League, then maybe he's got a case to say, look, if you look at the form over this period, I showed some consistency. I showed I can get a tune out of this team. And as well, I married that with a deep run Europa League. And, depending on how we went out and all these kind of things, I think he's got a case to say, if you back me in the transfer window, you give me players to rotate and all this stuff, I can really... I can show that I can do something in the league next season, then he's got a case. But if we still are losing, a third of our games or something like that, and not winning, not showing any sort of consistency whatsoever, and as well, we go out, especially if we go out early in Europa League, I think we probably got to say at the end of the season, look, we gave it a good go, we gave you every opportunity, and it hasn't worked, and we probably got to go another direction. But I still think he's got opportunities to save himself from now to the end of the season. And I think, I do think that we're going to see an upturn in form. Obviously, it's hard not to after the form we've been on. But I'm really hopeful that not only I think is the fact that we're going to have players back as well. These players haven't been playing that much, and maybe they're going to have a bit more energy and a spring in their step, and I think it's going to reinvigorate the players that have been waning as well over these last 2 months. I as well think there are a lot of teams above us, like Chelsea, like Bournemouth, who are really suffering from really bad injury crisis. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if their form starts to turn as well. And I'm not saying we're going to finish above them, but I'm saying we're going to come up against these teams in the coming weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if they start to wane a bit, and we can maybe capitalise on that kind of thing. So I think with our players coming back, with other teams maybe starting to get hit by injuries and their form starting to wane, with the Europa League still very much there, I think there's a lot to fight for us this season. And I know there are tactical issues. I know what Johnny's saying. And I think for sure, I think first of all, I think every team in the league, there's no perfect formation. There's no perfect tactic that can't be exploited. I think every tactic has a flaw, 100%. I think our flaws have been completely exacerbated by the fact that this injury crisis has completely exposed the flaws for what they are. And I think when this system doesn't have peak energy and peak intensity, it looks a complete joke. And I think that's what we've seen over these last 2 months. But I don't think that's the case when we do have a fully fit squad and we do have players who have that energy to run the yards that this system requires. And whether that's sustainable or not, that's obviously the jury's still out on that. But over a short period, which the next 2-3 months is, can we get the most out of this tactic and this formation and see the benefits of it? I really believe we can. And I think you're going to see that. I'm really hoping you're going to see the benefits of this really intense system over the next 2-3 months. And I get there's still kind of question marks over a whole season when you're playing 2 games a week. Is it sustainable? Is it going to be found out? And I think based off this season, there's definitely a case to say it's not sustainable and you can't keep that intensity up for 2 games a week and all these different things. But as well, I think all great managers, I think people, I know he's an experienced coach and I know he's nearly 60 and all this stuff, and I know he's married to a system, but throughout his coaching career, it hasn't just been he's stuck to one formation his whole coaching career. In some teams, he's played 3 at the back. In some teams, he's developed this way of playing throughout his career. So there's nothing for me to suggest that, give him time to analyse these issues that we're having, and he can make a few tactical tweaks, and maybe those issues can be resolved. Given that time. I think over the last few months, it's been very difficult to do that. We've had very little training. We've had a knackered squad. It feels like whatever we've done, tactical tweaks and stuff, it doesn't really matter when the team is just running on empty at the moment. Whatever you do, it seems as though they're struggling to maintain just the normal standards of Premier League football, let alone the intensity of any system we want to play. So I think it's been really tough to judge over these last 2 months. And I think the whole fan base has been beaten and beaten into a pulp in terms of loss after loss. And I think with each loss, it's only so much pain a lot of fans can take. And Andrew's definitely lost support along the way in these last 2 months. And I understand it, because with each loss, you're going to lose more and more fans. You're not going to gain fans with every loss. That's the reality. You're only going to lose fans. I'm still there. I'm still with him. I still think he can turn this around. But he's got to show it now, and it's on him. He's got the players back. He's got, he's going to be coming up against teams with big injury problems now. He's going to have players to choose from. He's going to have rotation options. So the excuses are going to be running out from now to the end of the season. So it's now the time to show it for him.
I get the feeling that even if we don't win the Europa League and just go far, like quarters, semis, final, and not end up winning it, I do feel that, I don't think we will do this, but I think if we does go for 2 points a game, like you're saying, from now to the end of the season, I feel that Spurs stick with him going into next season. And I feel that they'll basically lean on the fact that it was the injuries that massively hampered him. And if he can show a consistent level in the league of 2 points per game, then they'll bank on that, bring him a few new signings going into next season, that he can replicate that into next season. I think they'll bank on that.
I think the reality is, as much as there's a large kind of noise externally from the fans, us, let's be honest, we're calling for his head, obviously because of the, not me personally, but obviously as a fan base, there's a lot of fans calling for his head, because that's what we used to.
Now we know what he really thinks.
Huh?
Now we know what he really thinks.
I'm saying that's what we used to, right? When a manager is in this kind of form, they get sacked. That's what this board has always done, and so that's what we used to, and so that's what we expect when, as a fan base, right? Then that comes with in a way that comes with expectation. You're in this kind of form, you're going to get sacked, and you deserve to get sacked, because if these other managers got sacked for not as bad form as this, and they supposedly deserved it because they got sacked, that means they deserve to get sacked, and so that means Ange with this form deserves to get sacked. But in reality, we haven't really heard anything from this hierarchy or the board or anything in terms of reports or anything to suggest that they want to sack him or he's in danger of his job. So I think you're probably right. I think if he does show a level of consistency in terms of 2 points per game, regardless of the Europa League, he might still be in a job for next season. There's a good chance. I do think if we embarrass ourselves in the Europa League and let's say we get knocked out, we get really tactically outclassed and we get battered by a certain team who maybe aren't a Lazio or Bilbao.
Or if you just go out in the next round to one of Galatasaray, Alkmaar, Sociedad or Midtjylland.
Yeah, I think the noise might be too much. Maybe, I don't know. But at the moment, I think you're right. I think there is no suggestion that the hierarchy want to get rid of him. And I think they want to give every opportunity.
Don't you think, that's potentially because of the lack of options? Because when we've looked previously, the only reason he acted on the Pochettino was because Mourinho was around, and he made that happen within 48 hours. With Nuno, is because he tried to bring Conte in a few months ago, didn't happen. Then he managed to then convince Conte with the Paratici. I think personally, if Thomas Tuchel was still out of a job, or a Julian Nagelsmann was still out of a job and wasn't in with Germany, I think we would have made the change already. I think the board would have reacted and been like, all right, let's go. We're going to go a bit ambitious and bring someone else in who can actually take this team forward. I generally don't think that the noise has been as bad from the hierarchy. It's generally because of lack of options.
I think there's a couple of things. I think it's that. I think you're probably right. If Iraola was on a free right now, maybe we would have already pressed that button potentially. I think it's a couple of things. I think it is that. I think it's the fact that Ange as well, I don't think the board are in the mood to pay out another manager like they did with Mourinho and Conte. I think that's definitely plays into it. But I also think I do think genuinely there probably is an admission from the hierarchy that definitely we've been going in the wrong direction over the last 5 years with the way we've been going about how we've been approaching kind of the direction of this club, and with how the hierarchy do run things, right? We know that when you have managers like Conte and Mourinho, if you're not going to basically spend as ruthlessly as the likes of City and Liverpool and teams above us, then there's no point having these kind of managers like Conte and Mourinho, because they're never going to close the gap in terms of how they coach, just pure with the way we spend, right? So if we are going to operate in the way we operate, which is spending smartly, buying young players and all these kind of things, and if that's what we want to do, then you're going to have to give a manager a good amount of time to get that project up and running, and it's not going to happen really in the amount of time they've given Ange. And I know we want to always see progress and all these different things, and we think progress should be linear, and you want to see always an uptick every season. And look, I think we're right as fans to demand that. I think as well the hierarchy have probably acknowledged that the direction we'd be going in needed a complete reset, needed a 180 turn, and that was going to in itself potentially cause a lot of problems in the short term, which needs to be ironed out. Any manager was going to come in was probably going to hit a certain wall that Ange has hit in the time frame that Ange has been in the club, and you're going to have to ride through that. Allow that manager to ride through that storm and correct these issues and figure out these problems without having that pressure of constantly, if you don't figure out in the short term, you're going to be sacked, and allow him to iron out those issues. And I understand that it becomes a point where it gets that bad where you have to basically admit that this manager isn't the right guy to head this project, and you have to just go in a different direction. But I think the hierarchy also acknowledge that you look at the best managers right now. They've been given money as well, but the main thing as well, they've been given time to sort out these issues. They've been given many, many years, not just 2 years. They've been given 3, 4, 5 years, and that's how they've gotten themselves to the top. And we need to do that ourselves. We need to give the best chance to do that with any manager that we have, instead of keep firing every 18 months and continue this cycle. So I think that also plays into it. But I think you're right. I think, knowing this hierarchy, I think if there was a manager ready and waiting with top-class pedigree, there's a good chance they probably would have pushed that button already.
Yeah, there's the one thing having a manager, available, but there's another thing convincing him to come, and it goes back to George's point about this club being a graveyard for managers, and I feel like it's going to be a hard sell trying to get one of these managers to come to Tottenham Hotspur. You look at Iraola, how do you expect to look at what the work he's doing at Bournemouth, right? Is he going to jump out of there and come to Tottenham? You're looking at any manager right now. You're looking at the last few manager searches that we've had. We've always got the second, third, fourth choice manager that we've wanted. So I think that's another aspect of why they are sticking with Ange Postecoglou. But I mean, Johnny, do you feel the same? Do you feel that if he does get something like 2 points a game and he shows some consistency from now until the end of the season, that they'll stick with him?
I'd like to say, first of all, Simeon, you're wasted here on Tottenham TV, mate. You should be a defence lawyer.
That's not the first time I heard that.
I've just got on now. I mean, I don't even bet, but after listening to that defence, I'm just about to make a bet on Ange winning the treble next year. Oh, listen, look. It's about games, about opinions, and ours definitely differ. On that respect, I've admitted I don't believe he's the man, but I also admitted that you can't sack him now. I have not seen. This is not a blip, guys. Right? Oh, the injuries. Where? Right? Tell me, what's the story, Sim, between January and May of last year? What was the story then?
I'll tell you the story right now. We had a very good start to the season, right?
We all know about that. That's why.
Look, when you're defending Ange, you have to bring up the first 10 games. I think that's just the natural order of things. But we had the first 10 games. We then, in that Chelsea game, obviously, famously, we lost Romero, we lost Van der Ven, we lost Udogie, we lost Maddison. We had a little mini injury crisis, I think it's fair to say. Not as bad as it was this season, but obviously it was a little mini period. And in those next few games, we lost 4 out of the 5 games, with a draw at the Etihad in between that. Even though the performances in those games weren't bad, we lost those 5 games after taking the lead. I think it was a record, 5 games in a row taking the lead, and we lost. Then, after those that 5-game period, we got Romero back. I think we got Udogie back from suspension. I think so. We're only really missing Van der Ven and Maddison in that period. But for the next 16 league games, we were hitting 2 points per game after that 5-game period of after the mini crisis. So actually, we actually had consistent form all the way up until I think it was the end of March, beginning of April. We had really consistent form. We had 10 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses. That's top 4 form for the 16 games. So it wasn't just the 10-game period last season where we were good. It was actually after that mini injury crisis we actually did hit some consistent form. Then at the end of the season, I think 5 of our last 7 games were against the top 5. And in all honesty, we were terrible in those games, no doubt about it. We lost to Fulham away 3-0, Newcastle 4-0, Liverpool 4-2, City 2-0, and Arsenal 3-2. But I would say on the face of it, as much as those performances were terrible and a lot of those games they were over by half time, we were playing some really tough games and we were playing some of the top teams away from home. So it's not exactly like it wasn't exactly like it was a surprise we lost those games.
Brilliant, Sim. Brilliant. Listen, I'll read it. Look.
I can do this all day, Johnny.
I know you can. Listen, the 15th of May, I found a tweet here from the 15th of May. Yeah. And I put here, losing out on a Champions League place was not about last night's defeat to Man City or Spurs fans. And it was your refusal to change tactics. 5 defeats in our last 6 games. Only led once at half-time this whole year. Only 1 clean sheet in 20 games. Only wins in the last 10 games were against Luton, Burnley and Forest. And, you know, this isn't a phenomenon. You know, this isn't a blip. You know, at one stage before these last 2 wins, we'd had 9 wins in the last 9 months. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. I hear what you're saying, Sim, and I obviously there's going to be a counter argument to everything.
But Johnny, I get it. 9 wins in 9 months, but before the injury crisis, we were 6th, and we were 3 points off second. Like we weren't. It wasn't like before the injury crisis we were terrible anyway. We were in a decent position.
What did you see apart from beating the worst Manchester City team that I've ever seen, or beating, you know, I was at Old Trafford when we won 3-0. That's the worst Man United team I think I've ever seen. You know, they were fantastic performances. I'm not going to deny it, but they gave us a false sense of hope in those games.
I mean, we beat Villa 4-1. We beat
Yeah,
West
no,
Ham 4-1.
listen,
We beat
listen.
Everton 4-0. Like, there wasn't just those games. We were playing well into a lot of other games as well.
What about resting players for Ipswich in the Europa League and then coming and get beaten at home?
Yeah, that wasn't good. I agree. And he has to take
I was at
accountability for
Palace.
that.
You were at Palace, weren't you, Ben?
Yeah.
You were at Palace,
Yeah.
Ben Sim. You know, there was a team that hadn't won all season. And we
Yeah,
give
but they're a good team. Look at them now. They're in great form.
First win of the
well,
season,
Ipswich.
Yeah, but are we saying if we would have beaten them, they wouldn't be on this form? They're a good
Oh,
team.
no, I'm just
they
saying.
probably wouldn't. They probably weren't getting the results they should have at the beginning
No,
of the
but
season.
the
about
performance was
Ipswich?
absolutely shocking.
Yeah, we were bad. No doubt about it. I'm just saying we lost to Palace. Don't get me wrong, and it was a bad performance.
How long can you?
But they're not a terrible team.
But the thing is, you know, when you go on about you're not going to make excuses, and you know, as a manager, and then you go on to make those same excuses about your players being out, and you know, I don't hear Iriola with a much. Listen, look, Iriola, Bournemouth, train in a park, right, more or less. Okay, get dressed in a porter cabin. They have 11,000 seats a stadium, and they have an injury crisis where, you know, they sold their best player to us for 65 million, and their two replacement strikers are both injured. I don't hear him ever complain about an injury crisis. And what I see is a guy who's tactically astute to change the game. I mean, I watched the
John, you add European football to Iriola, and you see if he can keep up the same results.
I just think that
I agree with that.
I do think though that this is a manager that thinks on his feet, and he's watching the game. And also I know it's a bugbear of mine, but I've never ever watched a football team as a manager ever and sat there with my hands in my pockets when my team are imploding, scratching my head, thinking that my kids or the players are going to sort it out for themselves with my interjection. And when I watch it, when it's all going Pete Tong, and I see him standing there and not saying anything, I'm not asking him to be a Mikel Arteta. But I'll tell you something. When Arsenal were playing the other day, and there was a break in play, it's 0-0. It's not happening for Arsenal. Brings on Marino, and he calls them over as a break of play, and he's talking to every single one of them. Like, you're not here, you should be here. I want you here, I want you there. He was talking to every single one of them, and they're all listening. And whatever he said in that moment, it changed the game. It changed the game, and they scored those 2 goals. I want him to be a success, but there's too many things that say to me, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. I wish and I hope that I'm wrong. That's all I can say.
It is, Johnny. I feel like Ange in those moments when he's sort of just hands in pockets, similar to like an Ancelotti, he feels like he doesn't need to coach the players.
I'll put them in the same breath. I'll put them in the same breath.
Not in the same breath, but I just mean with regards to they don't feel the need to coach those players in the moments because they've already portrayed the instruction of what they want. They just believe the players know their instruction. They just need to carry it out. I think Ange lacks that in-game adaptability to react to what is actually going on in the game, to tell players to change what they want because he does want to change from his principles. We saw that in the Liverpool game when he said, oh, I tried this, and this is what happens when you defer from your principles, so I'm going to go back to how I want to play. And then Aston Villa played out, and we lost the way he wanted to play, but obviously he was clearly proud of himself and the boys for just going out there and trying and doing the Ange, so we are, mate, type of stuff. So as I agree with you, I do think that he needs to learn to just be a bit more adaptable in the game, talk to players, be a bit more vocal, because it does come across as a bit of arrogant at times. He's just like, oh, I don't need to do this, I'm above this. The players know what they need to do anyway, which I think players need to be reminded sometimes. And there has been times that I'm seeing him coach instructions out of players, the likes of Brennan Johnson and so on. But I just think it's not enough. I do agree with you, Johnny. I just think it's not enough.
But it's one thing, leaving Vinicius Junior and Joe Bellingham to get on and do their thing, to Timo Werner and Brennan Johnson. We're talking about levels here, and I don't expect, like I said, I don't expect him, like people say, oh, what do you expect him to do? Screaming and shouting and waving his arms about. No, I'm expecting some interaction. I'm not asking him to shake up the world, but I am expecting, when it's not going right, when there's a break in play. Why am I got to sit there, in a game when we're losing, and the winning manager, the team that's ahead, is giving more instruction to the team. They're calling them over in that moment, and our manager is saying nothing in a break of play. I don't get it. Some people.
I think that's a poor. I don't know if that's a fair criticism. I've seen him shout plenty of stuff from the sidelines, and I was actually watching an Ali Gold.
Don't pass backwards, Sim. Do you remember that one? Don't pass backwards. Now
that's it. Isn't that enough? No, I'm joking.
5 minutes of passing backwards, and he's saying, "Jack."
I felt he's got more animated as his Spurs tenure's gone on, though, and the more frustrated he's been getting.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I think he does talk. Maybe he doesn't get the whole team together, maybe like Arteta does at breaks in play, but he definitely does shout things from the sidelines. He has become a bit more animated in recent weeks. I think I've definitely found that. And look, sometimes managers, as you say, sometimes are like Ancelotti, where they just raise an eyebrow and it seems to change everything. And sometimes it's like you're an Antonio Conte, where every single second of the game you have to be shouting some sort of instruction. But I don't think that matters too much to how good of a manager you are. I think every manager has their own way of dealing with things on the touchline. Just because he doesn't do a certain thing, I'm not going to sit here and say he's bad because he's not doing what I would want to do when I'm on the touchline. I think it's just each manager has their own style. It's just about, for me, those things don't mean much. It's more about what you think tactically and all these different things, and how you think the setup is, and that's all fair game, that's all fair criticism. But I just think a lot of people like to attack his demeanour sometimes when we lose games. Oh, he looks at the floor and all these different things, and oh, he doesn't shout enough from the touchline. I just think those are just things to throw mud at him, which I think when you're winning, I don't think anyone cares about.
Listen, look, it's not about I've not seen this in a manager. Okay, when it's going wrong, I understand. When it's going right, fine. But, what have you ever done in your life when you sat there and you can see it's going wrong, where you just stood there and if you saw your kids about to cross the road and they're not at the zebra crossing, there's a car coming, right? You're going to shout, stop, or you're going to interact. It's very difficult to watch something that you're creating. Maybe that's the wrong analogy, obviously. But I'm just saying I found it almost impossible when I was managing kids of different ages, to sit there and not, when it's going wrong, not to say anything to them, to give them that coaching. And I hear what you're saying, they're professional footballers, but, I don't know if when I was 19 or 18, 19 years of age, I went out with good intentions, and 10 minutes down the road, I've forgotten what I was instructed to do, because your mind's all over the place, right? But he expects them to go out for like 90 minutes and strike their stuff and remember everything, and it's not happening, and he's not guiding them.
All right, look, let's move on to the last segment of the show, and we're going to be talking Daniel Levy and the Qataris, because there's been a lot of talk over the past week about the Qataris potentially coming in and taking over the club. I think was it Jeff Stelling?
No, Richard Keys.
Richard Keys was talking, I think, was it today or yesterday? I heard you and Sean talking about it, Johnny, on your show today. Yeah. Apparently, he's been talking and said he's heard from a source close to him that a deal is done. He didn't believe that was the case. And we saw some chap on Twitter, some Qatari chap on Twitter a couple of days ago talking about it as well. We don't know how... Yeah, Jassim, we don't know how reliable it is.
Third son of the Emir of Qatar.
Yeah, supposedly. But first of all, do you want the Qataris in? And second of all, do you think there is any truth to it, Johnny?
Listen, it's a hard one for me. I'm Jewish, proud of it.
As are we, Johnny. As are we.
Yeah. And
Yid Army through and through.
Yeah, Yid Army, and what I would say is, you know, because I don't have any problem with Arab ownership. I don't really care if it was Saudi or wherever. But for most Jewish people, Qatar is an issue because of their association and long-time support of not only Hamas on the ground in Gaza with money and finance, but also their leadership throughout the Troubles. I know they're trying to clear up their act now. Now Trump's in because they don't want to fall out with America, so they've asked them very kindly, could you leave? And they've gone to Turkey. But that is an issue. Maybe Qatar is now looking at themselves and are looking to take the Saudi Arabia approach. I've just come back from Dubai. Doesn't matter whether you're Jewish, Israeli, or whatever you are. As long as you abide by the rules, everyone was very friendly. I had, you know, a really good time apart from the accident. But maybe Qatar are looking to go down that route now, and it's harmed them. I definitely believed it's harmed them, the association with Hamas, and maybe they're looking to cleanse it. And if that is by taking ownership of Spurs, I know they're trying to get out of PSG because there just isn't the level of finance and income available now with the collapse of the French TV deal. And there just isn't the money there that there is in the Premier League and the opportunities that there are with Spurs. So maybe this is them, you know, coming for Spurs will give them a chance to cleanse their name and put them on you know, with a different viewpoint for how people see them. It is going to upset, I think, a large proportion of the fan base. Quite interestingly, Ben Sim, when I was on the East Stand on Sunday, and, you know, people were talking about the demonstration, and you know, they didn't realise that many people were going to be there, and like, how was I there? You know, being Jewish, and he's Jewish owner. And I said, because I don't believe in the owner. I think he's taken us as far as him. What would you think if Qatar came in? And I said, I'm not sure. And a couple of them said that they would give up their season tickets straight away, without even a question of thought. We know by the backlog of people wanting to join this club that if certain people did make that stand, their seats would be filled very, very quickly, especially if the Qataris came in and spent that money. So I think although people talk about it, for me, although I'm Jewish, Spurs is my religion. I put more time, I put more effort, as do you guys, into Spurs, your religious beliefs in Tottenham, than you do, you know, with the religion. So I would accept it. I don't know how comfortable I would be with it, but I would accept it. And as for validity, I think there's lots of options there. I mean, you've got QIA, which is the umbrella, the big company of which QSI is part of. QSI is a subsidiary almost of QIA. QIA is the Qatari Investment Association, and the QISI is the sports division of that. What would they do? I think with the rules and the decision that went with Manchester City the other day, it would enable them to come in and with an associate member of the group, say Qatari Airlines, for example, to sponsor the club and pay well over the odds of AI or any of the sponsors, and not get done by the Premier League under these rules, because City have challenged it now, and it looks like that's going to be taken away. I think it's possible. I mean, listen, Daniel's been with Rothschilds now for over 18 months. And I find it really, really strange that one of the best investment banks, merger and acquisition companies that are out there, we haven't done a deal yet. And that can only be one thing, and one man is dealing with Daniel and his valuation and full disclosure. And I think the only people that can pay the money are either the Saudis or the Qataris. And I think that's our best hope. You know, they always say, be careful what you wish for. And, you know, I've wished for Daniel and Enoch to leave or to bring in the money and him to step aside and concentrate on the finance. I'm quite happy with that. But I don't know. It's a tricky one for me. I want to see us spending more money, as I said, more than the 42%, and make us competitive on the football pitch. Because all said and done, I'm not interested in the noise and the other bits around the stadium. First and foremost, I fell in love with this club as a young kid for the football. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's what I want to concentrate on. And I think the Qataris or a Middle Eastern group are probably the only ones that are willing to pay over the odds for the group. I mean, like Todd Bowley, Clear Lake Capital were interested in buying the club, as were others, but they came across the troublesome point where Daniel Levy wasn't willing to step down as CEO of the company, and that's why the deals fell apart. Whether the Qataris are willing to do that, as was reported, I think it would have to be a phased buyout anyway, over 3 to 5 years. Personally, I think that's how it would transpire.
So do you think that would look like Daniel Levy staying on until that phased buyout is complete, or will he stay on after that?
No, I think he would leave on that. I think listen, I'd like to see a three-year plan. I don't want to see it going on for 5, but I think a 3-year phased buyout is more reasonable. The Qataris have sold, I think, 13% of PSG as we stand, and would like to get out. Not sure who would come in and buy their stake, because let's be serious, right? It's not an attractive buy. I don't think in any shape, way or form. If you're looking for growth, I think, you know, it's shrinking in France, whereas still growing here in the UK and the Premier League. It's still a growth prospect, even as much as the money that's coming in right now. God only knows where we're going to be going here with the next money-making scheme that the Premier League have got for us. But if the rules are relaxed and FFP and PSR become a thing of the past and are dumped, then unfortunately the football that we know it will no longer be competitive in the Premier League, and it'll be the people with the biggest amount of money who will go on and win everything, which will be Newcastle and Manchester City. So,
isn't that what happens anyway, though? You look at, you know, the trophies over the past 10 years, 20 years, it's all been Manchester City and Chelsea majority.
Well, that's because, Ben, we're talking about shutting the door after the horse has bolted. We allowed Manchester City and Chelsea to go and break every single rule and bring in everybody. And now once it's out the bag, you're then trying to close the door. But all that does is help Chelsea and Manchester City, who have already acquired the wealth, the trophies and everything else. So if that drops and we were to stay with Daniel Levy, I'm afraid to say that would push us further and further backwards, not push us forwards. And we would really need a Middle Eastern money or a massive buyer from America willing to put the money in, whether it's an Elon Musk or whoever it may be. It's hard to compete with sovereign wealth funds.
George, where are you at with it? Are you ready to end the ownership with Enoch and Daniel Levy? Are you, in favour of the Qataris coming in? Where are you at with it all?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I generally I try to separate politics, football, just completely, or any culture or anything. When I look at it, like you said, Johnny, I watch football and I'm more interested in Spurs than anything. I invest my time in Spurs, so when I'm looking at it, I just want the best owner that's going to come in and have the same passion for the club that we do as fans. Someone that actually wants to see the football grow. They want to see trophies come in, and they want to be similar to like when you saw the Leicester owner come in. He wanted to come in and he put so much into that club. And then when they won, he seemed so happy himself that he'd managed to reach and accomplish what he did with that club. So I just want someone to come in that really cares about us. Don't really matter where they're from. The Qataris do present a good opportunity because, like Johnny and yourself has highlighted, they do spend the most money. So if that means bring the Qataris in because they're going to spend the most money, then I'm all for it. I want to be like Man City. I want to be like Chelsea. I want to be a club that goes out there, acquires the top players, spends the top money to go out there and compete. So ultimately, I think the Qatari owners would be present a good option. As you said, you see what they've done over there in PSG. They've done all they can to try and put that club onto another level, another stratosphere, but they just struggled ultimately because they brought in the Messis, they brought in the Neymars, they brought in all the biggest names possible, but they just couldn't grow that club commercially as much as a Premier League club would. Tottenham presents an opportunity for a London club, a team in the Premier League, a team that's just ready. We've always been there or thereabouts, ready to explode. We just need that investment. So if you can get in at Tottenham and you can, see the opportunity for what it is, for what it presents, I think there's no other fan base that would be happier to bring them in. And when you talk about attractiveness, I think that makes our club so much more attractive to prospective players, prospective managers. So I'm all for it. If the Qataris are the ones that do want to come in, if it's not the Qataris and it's someone else, I just hope that the investment is going to be at a level required to then compete because we know what Daniel Levy's like. I think Daniel Levy is going to try angle a move to like what Johnny said, a 3 to 5 year phased buyout. But as we've seen in some of those reports, is he wants to be the chairman. This is the club is his baby, and he just doesn't want to let go. I reckon he wants to pursue and see the hotel build. He wants to have his property developments take place first before he actually lets go of the club, so he can be like, all right, this is everything I built. I've left it in this place, and then he can look to venture off onto newer pastures. But at this moment in time, I just don't see him letting go of the club. We make him and I mean Joe Lewis and Enoch so much money. They've took us from a 100, 200 million pound club to a now 5 billion pound club. So that they're just looking at this club is so much them revenue wise, commercially wise, and I can't see him letting go at so soon. But I think the best way to do it would be to get rid of Levy, bring in a football man and someone that actually knows football to run the club, because we all know it's been heavily published from when he even came in at Spurs, and you've seen all the quotes that he doesn't care about football, he doesn't know anything about football, but he knows how to make money. And essentially, that's where the biggest problem has been for Spurs over the last couple of years. Has been the focus on making money, but not making us a better football club. And I think for him, one of the biggest things is he likes to be too involved in the decision. He seems like a really everyone has worked somewhere before where you have a micromanager, and there's nothing worse than someone that's constantly on your neck, messaging you, have you done this, have you done that, want to get involved, oh, show me your work, and all these things. There's nothing worse than that, and I feel like he does this to a lot of people. Maybe Fabio Paratici was one that he worked well with, because Fabio Paratici was a workaholic, someone that was consistently working, but not everyone's like that, and some of the people at Spurs have probably been put off by his nature to be involved in every deal. And we even saw just with the Matisse Tel deal a few months ago, Daniel Levy flew out there. It made absolutely no difference between the player wanting to come. It took the manager making the phone call to then attract them to Spurs. So ultimately, if we can get someone in that's going to push Daniel Levy to the side and he's going to step aside and it's going to be someone that's football first, I'm all for it. I just want to see our club competing, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that. I mean, I used to be of the thinking that I wouldn't really want the Qataris to come through the club, but I mean, I'm just so starved of success and so starved of Spurs being a good football club. I'm just all for it now, and bring in the money with the new ruling that's come in. It'll do us the world of good, and we can be a powerhouse in football, and that's where my biggest love lies. So. Bring in the Qataris, bring in the state funds, and I think Spurs can go and push on and be one of the best clubs in the Premier League, if not, dare I say it, in Europe as well. And I think it'll do us the world of good. And I think the time has come. The time has come for Daniel Levy and ENIC to step aside, whether that be a phased buyout or a straight out buyout, whatever it may be. The time has come that Daniel Levy has done all that he can do at this football club. And don't get me wrong, as much as I'm very much against the ownership, I do commend the work that they've done, particularly off the pitch, with the stadium, the training ground, and the infrastructure around the stadium. But the time has come now. All this stuff is built. All this stuff is in the works for being built. It's time that we put our attentions and our focus on the football pitch, and I don't think that's possible to get to where us fans want to be with the current state that it's in. Johnny, you back now?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was having to go to see a specialist, but no, it's been put on hold. I said there was more important things than her broken foot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like the Qataris coming into Spurs.
The Qataris are coming.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to commend as well the effort the fans put in on the weekend in terms of making their voices heard. I thought the march was brilliant. I was there, alongside Johnny, and the good 1,500 absolute minimum on that march, and they made their voices very clear, and I do think that's just the start of it. And I think the more and more marches that happen, the more and more people will join them, and I feel there's a general consensus that Daniel Levy and ENIC have done all that they can at this football club now, and it's time to move on, and it's time for these kind of guys, in my opinion, to take hold of the club and to really put what we feel that should be done, and that's to get us fighting at the top. When you look at the stadium and the infrastructure, and the players coming into it, it gives the illusion of, we're ready to be a big club, but we're just not acting that way in the transfer market and on the football pitch at this moment in time. So I'm ready for change, and I'm ready for someone like the Qataris come in. I don't know how you feel, Sim.
Yeah, I'm definitely ready for change, and I think when it comes to Qataris, it is just a complicated issue. You got accusations of sports washing. You get, you remember when Newcastle had the Saudi takeover. There was big conversations at that point about sports washing and being, a kind of state-funded club, which there was some people not happy about and some people were willing to accept. But, the reality is we're now how many years into that ownership? 4 years? And that conversation's rarely had anymore. So I do think as time passes, those things ultimately die down, and ultimately they're not conversations people have. Obviously, when the Saudi ownership for Newcastle, obviously they've improved massively as a club, albeit they haven't maybe quite hit the heights that they're hoping for when they first took over, just because they've been hamstrung by PSR, because Newcastle as a club maybe don't earn the revenues as we earn, but we're not willing to spend the revenues as much as Newcastle are. So I don't think we're going to be as hamstrung as PSR issues like Newcastle. But you also remember when the Qatar World Cup was being held, a lot of people, again, held accusations of sports washing at that time due to, certain human rights violations and certain stuff. So I think there are conversations to have. Look, I'm not as politically involved or minded as a lot of other people, so I think my opinions on whether it is sports washing or whether, these are people we should be dealing with or not, I think those are conversations that are above my head, I think. But obviously when it comes to purely what it's going to bring to the football club and the investment it will bring, and the amount of money we're going to be willing to spend on top of the revenues we make, I'm sure that it's going to make us a lot more competitive, and I'm sure they see an opportunity where this stadium is a money-making machine, and I think they know that they're going to get return on investment 100% if they do take over this football club, and they do see it as a really good opportunity. And I think for Tottenham fans, I think there would be a feeling that definitely it'd be something to be excited about, I think, for sure, especially with this APTP ruling coming through. I think that if the Qataris were to take over at Tottenham, the ruling that just happened would probably be a benefit for Tottenham as well. Would probably be sponsored by Qatar Airways or something like that, and get a massive we'll get a massive influx of cash and have these massive sponsorship deals. And I think that's something Tottenham probably don't take advantage of enough, to be honest, right now, which is something we can massively take advantage of. We might have to get used to like being called the Qatar Airways Stadium or something like that, to be honest.
It'll always be the lane to us. It'll always
might
be
happen,
the lane.
in all honesty. I think
when you were talking
you might
about
have to get used to it.
When you were talking about sports washing, I thought you were talking about the hippie for a minute.
I don't know about that, but
no, but I think, look, the thing is, you know, we want to see great football. You know, there's been many clubs over the years that have had unscrupulous owners. You know, there's very few.
Roman at Chelsea, he's not squeaky clean. I can tell you that.
Oh no, let's look.
They're still singing his name in the concourse.
Exactly.
There are very few billionaires out there without dirt. Okay, as individuals, and you can bet your bottom dollar, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. You know, there's things there, you know, which you know don't make good reading. And you know, you could say the same for British owners. It's how it resonates with the fan base, and I would say that 90% of the fan base would probably be dancing in the street. I never forget when Newcastle they announced the takeover. All of a sudden, half of Newcastle was suddenly dressed in Saudi headdresses and all the rest of it. Talk about racist generalisation, because you know, when I went to Dubai, I would say I probably saw about 10% of the people dressed like that. But anyway, I think most of the people will be celebrating because they want rid of the owners.
I think, look, if this takeover happens, I think in the lead up to the takeover, I think there's going to be a big conversation. I'm sure the media is going to run with a few different things, and I'm sure that, you know, they're probably going to have to. They'll ask questions to answer, like they did to Eddie Howe when Saudi was taking over at Newcastle, or after that happened anyway. And there will be big conversations, and I'm sure. You know, some people fall on either side, but I think if it ever does happen, after it happens, I doubt those conversations will continue for much longer, to be honest. And I don't think, you know, people, as I said, people don't really talk about the Saudi owners anymore at Newcastle. People accept it, and I think people move on to the next thing. But I think in the lead up, I think people should be prepared for, you know, big conversations about certain things for sure, if it ever does come to that stage.
Can I just say about change for Tottenham, you know, what Ben was saying before? I think there's been a lot of comments that, you know, first of all, there wasn't many people there. There was only a few hundred. You know, I can say hand on my heart that I thought there was at least 1,500 to 2,000 from where I was standing. I think that's a fair level of a prediction of how many people were there. And in comparison, you know, to how many have been supporting this stuff over the years, you know, it's a massive increase. And, you know, we thank, you know, Change for Spurs and Billy T, Jay, Brian Daigle, and all the others, you know, who have raised awareness, you know, and people say it's a small fraction. You know, the stadium has 62,000 people, of which, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 of those were Man United fans, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 Man United fans. So it's a tiny fraction of Spurs fans who are actually protesting. What I would say is a movement doesn't begin with hundreds of thousands. A movement for change starts with a few hardy souls, and it gathers momentum. And I'd like to think that this is the start of the momentum. And I did also hear when I was talking to people, I said, oh, what do you think about Daniel? And they said, oh, you know, we'd like to see him leave. We'd like to see change. I said, well, why didn't you go to the demonstration? And they said, well, you know, didn't think that many people would turn up. We've seen them on the other side of the street before. There's about 50 people. You know, we're not going to do that. but seeing how many people were at that one, I might be tempted to go to another should there be another demonstration. So, I'd like to think that more people would go. I'm sure Change for Sirs have got other plans to keep up the momentum, which they will announce soon enough. I do find it really strange why Daniel Levy and the board don't communicate to the fans, because when you don't communicate, all you have is the ability to speculate. That's all we can do, is speculate.
Communicating in what way? What are you looking for them to communicate?
Well, communicate as to what we might do, what they might do, rather than have one meeting a year in front of a whole bunch of yes people, right?
So we got our Tottenham back.
We got our Tottenham back. Say you're going to build the museum and give us the museum. Tell us where the bloody statue is going to go of Bill Nicholson. Throw us a bone, make inroads. But he's never done that. So what we're left to do is speculate, and the speculation leads to, conversations, conspiracy theorists.
But there is a different etiquette, isn't there? Because Conte used to say, well, in Italy, the chairman would come in front of you and give you all the answers. But I mean, in England, it is a different etiquette.
It is, but what I'm saying is, are you a man of the people, or are you going to hide behind Scott Munn?
Well, we know the answer to that, though, don't we?
He's as invisible. Scott Munn is as invisible as he is. I mean, honestly, we just knew that Lange was going to be rolled out, 2 minutes after the window closed, to give us another BS story. But I'm just saying, because there's no communication, we're left to speculate and come to our own conclusions as to what's going on with the club financially, as far as raising funds. He's not raising funds to spend on the transfers. He's raising funds to, build the hotel. He's raising funds to develop Whitewebs and the ladies' stadium and the NFL training and stuff like that, which is of absolute no interest to the everyday average Spurs fan who just wants to see the football on the pitch. It's a sidebar issue. And he doesn't communicate. And that is the problem. There lies the problem. If he communicated with the fans 4 times a year, like you do on
but Johnny, if he was to do that anyway, everyone would just be saying everything he says is bullshit.
No, but Ben, don't you think at that point
if
it allows the fans to manage their expectation for what Spurs is going to be? Because right now, I think the biggest problem in the fan base is the lack of direction. We actually don't know what Spurs want to be. We don't know what the targets are.
Correct.
We can only assume.
Correct.
100%.
And that's what I'm saying, George. It's assumption and speculation, which leads to unrest. This is all of his own making. This movement and this anger towards him is of his own making. And some of the decisions that he's made, the own goals, the constant own goals that he's made against himself over years and years, he's not learned from any of it. And I just think, if we knew the club came out and said, look, we're looking to sell, right? He said we're looking for an investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking for an investment. You've told us, and quite rightly, Ben, you're 100% spot on when you say, won't fans say it's bullshit? Because everything he's given us has been bullshit. We were told we were going to get a museum to our fans. We told we were going to get statues. When I went down to Arsenal for that TNT interview, and I had to stand there waiting for Peter Crouch to turn up for half an hour. And I'm stood there and I'm surrounded by the cannons and the guys, all the crew were all Arsenal fans, right, who were filming it as well. It doesn't make it even worse. And I said, look, you look a bit agitated. I said, it's really pissing me off. I was seeing all these statues, Thierry Henry, Arsene Wenger, and all of this, and yet we can't have one. We can't have one. This guy does not understand our fan base.
It's because Johnny, there's no HD pictures of any of our legends to replicate into a statue. You know, they're all from the 60s and the 70s. So I mean,
You can
we need
still
some. We need some. We need. No, I'm joking. But you need some. You need some recent legends as well. Like, who are we going to make a statue of? Harry Kane?
No, for me, you do. Look, you take your kids down to the stadium. It doesn't matter how old the legend is, right? It can be the first black man to ever play for Tottenham Hotspur, right? Okay, the guy who went into the army now, his name escapes me now. He used to know off the bat.
Walter Tull, wasn't it?
Walter Tull, that's it. All right. Okay. So he could be a statue. You know, my point here is when you take your kids, when you take your son, Ben, down to the stadium in years to come, and you go outside and you see the statue and he says to you, Dad, who's that? And you tell him, right? Okay, you're passing on the history of the club.
No, I get it.
And there is nothing that we have now. It's like been ethnically cleansed of all history of this club, and I find it angers me a lot because it doesn't.
Just know the first statue that's going to prop up will probably be like an NFL legend or something like Brady or something stupid like that. But back on George's point about, you know, he needs to be more communicative and tell the fans the direction the club is going in. I mean, he has come out and said, you know, the stadium is going to be a game-changing stadium. It's going to be prop us up against, you know, the best teams in Europe and all that kind of stuff. But everything that he sells us is bullshit. So, I mean, what's the point? Is anyone going to believe him?
Yeah, no, I think we know that Levy does. These guys are just going to talk a load of rubbish at times, and they're just going to say what you want to hear. But at the same time, it just allows us to, if he can communicate what the team is aiming to do on the football side of things, because that's where the problem is. You say you're competing for these players and the stadium's going to allow us to bridge the gap, but we've not bridged the gap in competing for players. We're still not putting in those high bids. Our still most expensive player are the 60 millions, and to be honest, 2 of the 60 million pound or 3 of the 60 million pound players we brought in weren't at that required level when we did bring them in, so we're still making the wrong decisions. I think it's just we need the owner, like in Levy, and the chairman to come out and just say, look, with regards to football, we're aiming for so and so. In order to get it, we're going to do so and so. So whether the club wants Champions League football, okay, in order to get Champions League football, this is the 2 to 3 year plan that we're going to take to get there. Like we just need that clear communication so we can manage our expectations. Because I think the problem with a lot of the fan base is so many of different fans have different expectations for Spurs. Some people think we should be competing for top 4. Some people are just happy with us being a European team, and some people just want us to be a cup team. That's far too wide, and there's so many different things you can get from that. If the chairman actually comes out and says this is what Spurs are aiming for, this is where we should be, then we can come out and acknowledge that as fans, be like, all right, this is what we're aiming for. But right now, it's like we just want to be a top 4 club or get to top 4, but there's no clear direction to actually get there. We're just bringing a manager. If that manager's good enough, he'll get us to top 4. Conte got there once, and we've not been a top 4 club. I mean, we've been one top 4 finish in 5 years? Like, we're not a top 4 club at the moment. So
since
how are we
Poch
going to get
left
back?
once, 1 year.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Sean Butler's in the chat.
Of course he is. Any conversation about Levy and investment, he's all over that, Sean Butler.
He said very few, if any, chairmen communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I said, you know, because in Italy it's more of an etiquette thing to come out for the chairman and explain the decisions and explain what the plans are. But in England, it's very rare that any chairman does do that. So, yeah, I do think something's going on in the background. I genuinely believe it is, but we'll have to wait and see what happens, won't we? But, yeah, I think that brings an end to the panel show for you guys today. I want to say a massive big up to Johnny H and George for coming and joining us today. George is back on the watch along, I think Bournemouth game next month, so very much looking forward to that alongside myself. And George, tell the people where they can find you, my friend.
Yeah, big up, man. Durag Diaries, that's where I'm on YouTube. That's I see you've added myself in the name of the video, so you can just click there. I usually have lives every day, pretty much, if not a live every other day, so just come and join me over there. I usually I've got my chest, especially when we're talking about rivals. I try to be an optimistic Spurs fan when I can, but at the same time, you know, Spurs are in a good place. So always trying to give the realistic talks each and now and then. And yeah, man, just come on, check me out on my channel when you get time.
Big up, George. And Johnny, where can the people find you?
Jules, first of all, first time streaming with you, mate. Big up, and enjoyed it, mate. And good luck with the channel. Yeah, so you can find me on Johnny H3232 on X. And if you're on Instagram, I've lost my account, which I had a few thousand on. Called Talking Tottenham 1882. And I've got a new channel that I've started with Sean called Football Inc., which is basically everything to do with football. So if you could go down and subscribe to that, I'd be really obliged. It's basically, you know, I come on these shows and I talk Spurs all the time, but I've got a big love for all things football. And, you know, that when you've got guys like you guys, We Are Tottenham TV, and Spurs Talk Show and Last Word on Spurs and such like, doing such a fantastic job. It's a crowded space, and I think there may be a bit of a room for a chat about other things football. So get on down, and appreciate, guys, you having me on. It's been a long while, but I'm glad to come back and have a chat with you.
Big up, guys. Thank you for coming on once again, Johnny and George. And big up to everyone in the chat as well for sticking around this nearly 2 hours now. But yeah, we'll see you all very soon. More content to come over the course of the next couple of days. But like, subscribe and comment. And as always, come on,
you Qataris.